Hello and good evening all. Welcome back to the digital platform of Sadhun Chandra Mahavidyalaya. I, Udhun Maji, Assistant Professor as well as Head of the Department of English of Sadhun Chandra Mahavidyalaya, cordially welcome you to session number 23. We're fortunate in this session, actually we are fortunate to have a very distinguished academicians on our platform. And this session number 23, is international session. And we are fortunate to have a world famous academician amongst us in this session. And who is he? Already you know. So before telling about him, I would like to welcome our distinguished guest officially on our digital platform. Then I'll tell about his academic career. So let's welcome our distinguished guest on our digital platform. Sir, thank you very much. And first of all, good morning to you because at New York right now it is 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, it's 7:30. First of all, sir, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And as you know, that most of the participants they don't know about sir that not only sir has given his consent for this talk, but also sir himself helped me a lot to get a very good and academician on this platform. So thank you very much for this reason. And if you have few words about our venture that we have been doing, because you know quite a lot about our projects, so then we'll be very happy for that.
Yes, well, I'd like to thank Professor Gautam Maji for setting all of this up. It's quite a rich and varied program of lectures on literature and the arts, so you should be commended for that. Thank you very much. It's a lot of work.
Thank you very much, sir. Before Dr. Gregory Tague commences his insightful lecture, I'd like to inform all of you his academic career. It's very great academic career that he has. Right now, he is a professor of English and interdisciplinary studies of Francis College of New York City, and he completed his BA from Brooklyn College and MA from Hunter College, MPhil from New York University, and PhD from New York University. He also penned some scholarly books, and these are Character and Consciousness, George Eliot, Thomas Hardy, D.H. Lawrence, Phenomenological, Ecological, and Ethical Readings, Ethos and Behavior, the English novel from Jane Austen to Henry James, Making Mind, Moral Science and Consciousness in Philosophy, Science and Literature, and Art and Adaptation is the topic of his lecture today is also. Art and Adaptation, a primer from notes. Uh, Next one, Evolution and Human Culture, Text and Context. Then Art and Adaptability, Consciousness and Cognitive Culture. Next, an Ape Ethic and the Question of Personhood, as well as he has edited some books also, scholarly book editor and contributor. These are Origins of English Literary Modernism, 1870 to 1914, Origins of English Dramatic Modernism, 1870 to 1914, co-editor Daniel Mayer Dink Graffe, as well as some literary anthologies he also did. This is some book editor, Pain and Memory, Reflection on the Strength of the Human Spirit in Sufferings, and Common Boundary, Stories of Immigration, Battled Ruins, Writing on War, Being Human, Call of the Wild, Fathers of Faith and Patterns of Doubt, Short Stories and Poems, and journal editor, academic articles. And he is also the editor of literary website. This is bibliotecos.com. And he also runs one online journal that is Literary Veganism. So we are really fortunate and happy to have a great academician amongst us. So, sir, the session is yours, and we are excitingly waiting for your insightful lecture. So the session is yours, sir.
Okay, great. So why don't we get started? This presentation is by a professor of English, so there are some caveats. It's basically an overview of art and adaptation, and it's segmented as follows: general observations, culture, adaptive functions, neurobiology and cognition, and then when I'm finished, I can recap and we can have a conversation. Is art inconsequential with no biological or cognitive value? Is art connected to health, pleasure, play, neuroplasticity, sexual selection, sociality, and individual and group emotions? Symbolic material culture and art making are deeply embedded in our evolutionary history. And we continue to make art. Why? Consider some universal themes across art: survival, romance, family, individual values, group identity, altruism and reciprocity, religious and spiritual beliefs, and warfare. This list is indicative of behaviors that arose from selection pressures concerning the survival of our ancestors. In terms of biology, there are striking benefits to making art over the costs, and the behavior is not only passed on by instruction and learning, but the impulse is innate and heritable. There is no single cause for our proclivity to make art. In fact, cause is not the appropriate word. Rather, there is a medley of adaptations that gave rise to how and why we make art. Here's a simplified sketch. Our hominin ancestors evolved a larger brain due to a number of selection pressures, such as tool manufacture, resource sharing, and group living. The larger brain responded to survival pressures and so produced hand tools and later body paints and ornaments. With the rise of larger groups and their cultures, rituals, and symbolic marks, group identity with graphic communication appeared. Controversially, just as Darwin proposed sexual selection in many species, like the peacock's tail, so too in our species, art culture could be a response to mating pressures. Our brain adapted to a number of pressures simultaneously, such as calculating in terms of space, objects, and events, and evolved to handle intelligence modules communicate with each other. A bone left over from eating could be manipulated for use, such as a tool. The bone could be used for decoration or status, like bodily ornamentation. Our evolved ability to re-engineer physical objects for a number of purposes, especially associating them with our beliefs, values, and practices, gave rise to symbolic culture. So let me talk a little about culture. In his History of Art, H.W. Jansen says that because of its, quote, intrinsic value, we often set art apart from our routine lives, whether in caves or museums. This is a modern and Eurocentric viewpoint. In prehistory, art behavior was closer to material culture and had functional value. Outside of Europe, prehistoric art, especially of Asia, is almost ignored. Art did not originate in Europe. What we now call art was material culture for symbolic remembering. body paint, or adornment for social status or group identity. Janssen's history is more to fine art, and so he lays great emphasis on meaning, ideal form, and order. The adaptive functions of art take into account how lines are cerebral and how color is sensual, seen in male animals that attract female mental and emotional capacities. The stylized art Janssen speaks of is a late development in a history that has roots in the natural world and natural processes. Our primate mind evolved culture to solve adaptive problems, such as mate selection, communication, group relationships, and cooperation. Culture is a process whereby individuals recycle information differently and progressively. We don't just copy movements, we understand the meaning and complexity of such movements and the implications they have. Culture helps us guess at intentions among people and even with objects. We need to read other minds for many reasons, ranging from selecting mates to negotiating social situations. Cultural representations help satisfy our desire to guess what another mind is thinking. There could be any number of selection pressures that helped evolve the mind. An adaptive target, such as what to eat or whom to associate with. Background conditions, such as eyes and face, or other environmental cues, help evolve the mind. Our mind evolved in figuring out how things work and how well these things work. Prehistorically, culture was not out there waiting to shape us. Instead, over an evolutionary process embedded in countless generations, we've created culture. While cultures vary, there is some underlying regularity. Values and beliefs differ, but it's human nature to have values and beliefs. This explains why we not only learn our own culture, but can assimilate into another culture. The mind is not a blank slate at birth, and evolution has not erased our instincts. Notice how easily a child makes art, and then, as an adult, responds emotionally and intelligently to art. Contrary to Piaget's schematic of learning in stages, infants are born with concepts of objects, distinctions between animate, inanimate, and spatial notions of movement and distance. These evolved functions have been reborn in human beings, genetically transferred and inherited billions of times. We can understand the art and culture of other people since these symbolic forms are rooted in us. Not unlike genes, culture is information that affects behavior. Cultural group selection would have found certain genetic tendencies advantageous, like cooperation. Artistic behaviors, whether cave painting or ritualized tattooing, spread as a means of group inclusiveness. Whereas stone tools existed 2.5 million years ago, by the time of anatomically modern humans, we have ritualized symbolic culture and artifacts, and cognition is exhibited through material objects. We are a thinking species whose ideas are implicit in the objects we make. For example, there are pierced and painted shells and engraved stone about 75,000 years ago, as well as beads of red ochre in South Africa from about 160,000 years ago. Scholars debate the origins of symbolic culture. Close to 80,000 years ago, we begin to see jewelry like beads, teeth, or ostrich shells strung together, bone, antler, and ivory artifacts, bows and nets, and more sophisticated tools. Before shells were drilled to be strung together, they might have been collected and shared nonetheless. Some scholars place symbolic art forms much earlier, and even among Neanderthals. Bodily adornment or self-awareness dates to 2 million years ago and renders any cognitive super development at 50,000 years ago or thereabouts as unlikely. So let's talk a little about adaptive functions, sexual selection, landscape preferences, and we'll talk a little about cave art. Pictorial representations supply information about geography, climate, and wildlife. Visual images could be a means of offering a different solution to a problem. Plastic and musical arts provide value symbols to bind members of a group. Art culture could have served to stimulate cognitive mechanisms to enhance memory, engage in mental play, or permit display of social status or sexual desire. Whichever functions one takes into account, all engage the human mind to perceive, process, contemplate, copy, and respond to the social and natural worlds. We have art since it is part of our neurobiology at play, stems from our symbolic and imaginative capacities, helps some people distinguish themselves from others, and evolved from means to attract and select mates. Artistic productions demonstrate not only capacities for mental representation, but also the ability to plan and execute an artifact. This is not to say there are specific genes for art. Rather, there are genes for creativity and imagination in all human beings. And once creativity began, what we now call culture helped spread the practice. On the one hand, such productions differentiated individuals, so there might have been some aspect of sexual selection, as Darwin saw in the colors and antics of birds. If I can expend time and energy to fashion this beautiful stone tool, which I might never use, then I am more fit mentally and physically than those other guys who just sit there doing nothing. Fitness equates to healthy offspring who survive and reproduce. Tools could have been traded for favors or resources and represented status. Even male chimpanzees will trade meat for sexual favors or enhanced reputation. At a later date, wood and stone artifacts, beads, tattoos, skin piercings, color pigments could have been part of ritual performances. Beads, for instance, of about 30,000 years ago, were probably more for social status than mere personal decoration. Colored pebbles, bones, teeth were collected, shared, and displayed. Why? Was there no fitness-enhancing component, such as direct, indirect reciprocity to the practice of gifting distinctive items? These ornaments held not only ritualistic value, but personal, symbolic, or cultural attitudes. Art pleases us, and if it did not, nature would have selected it out of our repertoire of functions. Art does not just please us cognitively, but it fosters sociability through symbolic and emotional communication. We like to talk about art. Art demarcates and implies attention, fitness-enhancing traits. In Darwin's estimation, many of the mental faculties were evolved adaptations concerning discriminations for sexual selection. This means a male has an advantage over another male in terms of reproduction. Female birds will choose among many males, and most likely choose the most fit. In this way, males will advertise their fitness with elaborate song and brilliant colors to demonstrate how they can expend considerable time and energy and yet survive well. One instance is the peacock's iridescent train, which he uses to charm a female. Types of art display co-evolve along with the evaluation of such display. There is a cognitive feedback so that new forms of display emerge, like a variety of bird songs across generations. Beauty and the sense of color are not limited to human beings, says Darwin. Apes like the color of ripe fruit, an adaptive function. In other cases, for jellyfish and lizards, color derives from natural selection to make them appear poisonous or unpalatable to predators. In terms of sexual selection, color is attractive to females. Certain dragonflies are attracted by color. Not coincidentally, there is no color in blind beetles. Some butterflies and moths have colored wings, but only on one side for display. Darwin was convinced that much of the color on male creatures, usually the most colorful and ornamented, from insects, fish, to mammals, is for exhibition and performance. Conspicuous ostentation functions to attract females and demonstrates their mental faculties of discrimination and taste. Characteristics of color or other ornaments, like horns, have been transferred to females, but the male typically has more color and more pronounced features. Colors are innate and designed for attractiveness, evidenced in how the male's brightness will increase with sexual maturity. In The Descent of Man, Darwin spends considerable time discussing ocelli, or eye spot designs, on the feathers of male birds. Darwin is convinced that an ocellus, effective only at a certain angle, is an adaptive feature via sexual selection and evolved from spots and lines. The ocellus attracts attention. Even in our own art culture, consider how much emphasis is placed on portraiture and on eyes in portraits. In order for aesthetics to evolve, there should be two requirements. First, an individual must possess an element that another perceives and registers as a signal. Second, the perception of a signal element is cognitively evaluated, leading to some type of preference for it. With any discrimination for signals, an aesthetic sense can evolve. Most likely, there has been a co-evolution of both the signal and the perceiver's judgment. Our hominin ancestors over 2 million years ago, and subsequently from Africa, Europe, and Asia, produced thousands of stone implements. An attractive material artifact communicated any number of signals, including prestige in non-physical male-to-male competition. The tools were not just practical, but in shape and design They could have served as repeated fitness indicators of manual dexterity, strength, and cognitive ability to plan for resource allocation. Tools are symmetrical because we have an evolved bias toward balance, especially in terms of characteristics like body and facial features. Tool manufacture demonstrates whether or not one can accomplish this preference. The ability to expend time and effort to make an attractive tool indicates that the maker has good genes. Tools could have functioned as aesthetic displays that were meant to call attention to the maker. In a survey of over 1,000 Americans, artists Vitaly Kolmar and Alexander Melamed discovered that people preferred to see animals and human beings in paintings. The preferred colors were blue, followed by green. This survey was later repeated in 9 other countries spanning Asia to Africa, and there appeared a universal pattern of preference for a natural environment containing some trees and water, similar to a savanna, but not a forest. Favored landscapes, Kolmar and Melamed found, seemed to possess complexity but yet coherence. A preferred visual composite is somewhere between the extremes of randomness and uniformity. In addition to being comprehensible, viewers enjoyed some mysterious aspect, like a beckoning horizon. We prefer canopy trees and have a predisposition for watery surfaces. Polling contemporary tastes in art is of little value, since art is not only an adaptive preference. One needs to explain why we have an evolved capacity for aesthetic experience, a heightening of our emotional and cognitive responses. Art is a complex response and not merely a stimulus cue from adaptations. Kolmar and Melamed's ideal painting contains an aggregate of what most contemporary people want in a landscape. We cannot say for sure, though, that our ancestors would respond as do we to the same painting. An art experience is not just a reflex. Nonetheless, art triggers shared emotional and cognitive responses across cultures about our biological interests, such as human relationships, water, animals, and landscape. We respond positively to bright and clear colors, which suggest life and vitality. We respond negatively to dark and drab colors, which suggest death and sickness. We also find compelling any lines that meander or crisscross, since they signal danger. By themselves, these types of elements alone are not art. Beyond mere adaptive preferences, there needs to be, as we see in highly ritualized ceremonies or performances, some significance about the artwork. What we call art is not just a display of adaptive function, like the peacock's tail, but the making of shared and collective meaning. Arts and tools did not spring wholesale overnight. Instead, there was a prehistory of cultural practices that helped behaviors flourish. The implied learning and conditioning involved in making and appreciating tools and artifacts served a cooperative function that helped perpetuate a lineage. This thinking does not necessarily negate the adaptive function about art. What we define as art was, in its early stages, material culture. So the art-making behavior of 2.5 million years ago in stone tools progressed into other media to help us adapt culturally. Looking at the human fossil record, we note that two male crania from about 70,000 years ago at what is now Erbil, Iraq, reveal artificial head binding deformations. During the late Stone Age, we find deliberate teeth filing or removal. After this period, there is more extravagant dental and cranial alteration, where we find precious stones and metals in teeth, which are also either incised or shaped. This behavior spans Europe, North, South, and Central America, Africa, Australia, and Asia. Elaborate body decoration is art behavior, since its function is to attract meaningful attention. About 75 pigments, including yellow, red, and brown, were used by Homo erectus at what is now Nice, France. These colors were manufactured from various compounds such as ochre, clay, or sand, shale, and sandstone. Black manganese would also have been used. Art materials have been found on bodies in burials, in teeth, on the remains of a deer, and deliberately prepared mammoth bones at Moldova. The red ochre pigment develops along with bodily modification and decoration, as well as the use of beads and pendants. This is noteworthy. Against any adaptive hypothesis, art might have sprung inadvertently from other behaviors. Color was readily available from soils and rocks. Nonetheless, symbolic artifacts hold and carry ideas, values, and memories. So the art-making behavior was existent even if some accidental occurrence gave rise to new manifestations. Most Stone Age art was on exposed walls and has since been lost. A certain mindset was necessary to make this art, and much time was needed to find and prepare materials. Inside caves from prehistoric people were seen as otherworldly, beyond the natural realm, and risky. Cave paintings constituted an act to challenge, overcome, or meet the supernatural, perhaps for shamans to harness the power assumed to reside there. This explanation might not be the most parsimonious. Since young men appear to have been among the cave painters, the costs involved might indicate some type of mental and physical test. The many animals depicted in cave paintings are daunting and less hunted creatures. Later developments suggest that proportions don't really matter. At Cantabrian Spain, the doe is most typical, an animal associated with myth. Some good walls in extensively used caves, such as Chauvet, were not marked, which has led to speculation that the artist needed to take advantage of the shape, texture, and contours of a panel. The walls themselves were magical, evident from the application of bones and indications that people touched the wall without painting. Wall art functioned to exhibit external data about the natural environment previously stored in the brain. There are over 350 caves from southwest France, northeast Spain, and even in the Ural Mountains. France and Spain have 95% of cave art. Often left out of this discussion are the rock arts of Siberia, China, and India. Prehistoric art behavior was widespread. Caves in India bear cuttings most likely made in the early Stone Age with Oldowan tools, which dates art making as early and not confined to Europe. Some artists employed a stippling effect to make use of contours and other aspects of rock walls, which were often scraped in preparation for art. In some cases, paintings were done on top of a previous depiction. Generally, there were no major style shifts over the course of time. Most paintings are of animals, herbivores, horses, but the oldest so far caves at Chauvet has predatory beasts, lions, and bears. The animals depicted were not necessarily those of the area or those hunted. Evolutionary psychology tells us that in terms of mating habits, young men take risks to display their fitness. The danger of the caves might have been a means for such male advertisement. Handprints from the caves have been analyzed, and the conclusion is that the art there was produced by adolescent boys. Art in remote caves could then be part of so-called young male syndrome, evident today in risky behavior to outcompete rivals. Because of dramatic climate changes, such as glaciers that would have destroyed caves, as well as exposure to light, animals, moisture, bat droppings, and pollen-infused growth, we have only a portion of all cave art. Caves preserved what was undoubtedly lost on the outside. Other artifacts from antler, bone, and stone survived because of the durable material. Wood and clay artifacts succumbed to the elements. Just to emphasize, artistic behavior in prehistoric people was not uncommon and geographically widespread. So let me talk now a little about neurobiology and cognition. We evolved the ability to compress multiple inputs to manage them, and this has given our species, in conjunction with sexual and social selection, the ability to make art. Our brain neurobiology has evolved to seek cohesiveness. We want to be in control of our bodies and environment. With abstractions, like the cubism of Picasso, both artist and viewer are engaged in a process of mentally negotiating irregularities. This is not to say we don't like to be visually surprised. Irregularities arouse our curiosity. Artistic culture can be an enigma of incompletion that cognitively challenges us to attempt completion. We like to solve puzzles. Artistic culture is a form of mental play we participate in for enjoyment, to satisfy an unconscious need for brain health. Mental activity in artistic culture for both artistic viewer and the artist includes how we are tested with unpuzzling as if and what if scenarios. Cognitive play in art is a form of detection where we attempt to figure out what we are seeing. Even in cave paintings, there are arrays of dots and lines. What if visual configurations are adaptive? This mental play will strive to make what is piecemeal whole. To achieve these mental feats implies that we have the ability for completion of the as if and what if scenarios. Form in artistic culture must consider cognitive structures related to the perception of movement. These motor brain structures make judgments about patterns and have been responsible for the basis of what we now call art. Though it appears static, visual art and sculpture contain movement. overt and subtle, to which we unconsciously respond. Such mental responses are clearly adaptive. If cognition enables art, can't we say both evolve together? We have sight for an adaptive reason. We don't have sight for cognition. We see to perceive, evaluate, and understand, to recreate so as to avoid or approach. When those behaviors moved from cognition to durable forms, whether a cave wall or canvas, does that make them any less adaptive? Art duplicates brain functions in its attempt to sketch an environment. Variants in art reflect how our brain tries to accommodate ambiguity we find in the physical world, including the minds of other people. Art seems ambiguous because our brains are always in an interpretive mode, where often there is no single answer. Ambiguity in art is not special since the brain itself is not a passive receptor, but an active meaning maker. Rather than being discarded as useless, ambiguity becomes part of trying to find solutions. While the brain prefers stability in processing its environment, it is designed to handle ambiguity and invites mental play. Ambiguity is not uncertainty, but the realization that our consciousness can accommodate a number of solutions to any problem. Seeing the world of objects, people, and events in abstract outlines is a biological perception for understanding reality. Art relies on a basic brain function, forming abstraction. Because the brain is effective in homing in on information and then processing it, ideas about that information are retained. Art derives from the brain's ability and need to take information as abstraction and store or communicate it. The brain's neurobiology abstracts so that it is not required to maintain millions of pieces of particular data. Art is a process of abstracting what we see. Therefore, art is the physical extension, not a byproduct, of cognition. Detailed information about an object, event, or person is necessary for the making of an abstraction. Realistic representations are memory aids. However, an abstraction is a shortcut for the memory and most likely an adaptive function. These abstracting processes are responsible for the brain's making a complete form of something that consists of separate parts, such as shape, color, and motion. The brain's evolved efficiency is such that there are quick visual responses that are separate, combined into a general idea that consists of many parts. What we call art is the intended result of the brain's ability to make and decipher perceived abstractions. Our brain enjoys participating in objects, events, or visual perceptions that are not complete. We can see, using our brain, an image that is open to multiple interpretations. The brain processes the parts and attempts to come up with an ideal or answer of which there might be alternatives. This is an adaptive function, for the brain will select what it computes as the best solution in what-if-then situations. Perceptual hierarchy runs like this: location, color, motion, orientation. There is asynchrony because of comparisons dealing with color and motion among the evaluation of other visual characteristics. Perceptions are not bound in a straight line. They might bind after consciousness, so that there is a tier of micro-consciousness, macro-consciousness, and then unified consciousness. We are not aware of the micro and macro operations, only the unified one, which equates to the perceiving self. We find satisfaction in being able to recognize or create patterns. We respond positively and favorably to color combinations in flowers. In any given moment, we can attend to and compute only so much informational input. The demands of attention place stress on our older brain system, which signals the executive brain, which sends information back to the older system. We need to know how to react when we see an object or event. Such a fury of activity across regions will create some partiality and shortcuts in what is perceived as we try to get to the quintessence of an image. The brain compiles details to find a more essential design. Part of our cognitive success derives from taking particles of information and connecting them, to have at hand an idea of something to compare with another version. On one viewing of visual art, many brain cells respond, but then fewer with repeated viewings, indicating that an idea of the object has been stored for reference. Since we are highly social creatures, we do this for comfort with people as well. This sorting and compiling capacity has adaptive functions when confronting a stranger or entering an unknown area. So that is the end of my presentation. I have some recap questions and pointers up there. I don't know if you want me to leave them up there or if we can gravitate to a general discussion.
Okay, so can you hear me out? So
Say that again, please.
can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, 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 sir. So first of all, it's a challenging session, honestly speaking, because with rapt attention, I have been just listening to your lecture, and it's a great lesson. It's a great engaging session for all of us. Thank you very much for your valuable time that you have given for us. And for question answer, okay, I have uh, okay, some people they have liked this thing, your lecture, they have expressed this thing. So there is one question that I'm taking on the screen. Hope you can read it out, and if you can't, then you can tell me. I will read it out for you. So, could you read it out the question?
The description of male and female Goldacronomus pseudopicatus, I don't know what that is, a new species from Colombia,
Colombia.
South Africa. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Okay.
You know, at the beginning of my presentation, you might have noticed a slide. And
Yes.
if you know from my biography, my PhD is in English. I'm neither a biologist nor a cognitive scientist. I got into this because I was interested in character and motivation. That led me to the study of the brain. And because I studied the brain, then I studied evolution, and one thing led to another. So whoever's asking that question, I would bet that the person asking that question has something of an answer. So maybe that person could tell us the answer.
Okay. Right now, I don't know exactly what the person is with us or not, but yes, if possible for the person, definitely, I hope that this person will give the answer. The question, I think this. he would like to check this whether this is correct or incorrect. I hope so. Not exactly the question this is, but what I find on the comments box is that people have liked your session, but particular question I can't find in the comment box. But I have found that you have a special love for ape, and you have a book on this also. So could you tell us about this thing, sir? Okay,
Yes,
something there is one question. First, I will take the question, then I'd like to get from you that your special love for an ape. So this question I'm taking. This is from Shruti Sri Mohanty. Uh, so, can you read it out?
I am working on Susan Sontag's On Photography. Can you please speak a few lines on this essay? I must admit that I read that so many years ago, I have forgotten.
Okay. Shruti Sri Mohanty, unfortunately, it's impossible for him to answer your question. Okay, so we'd like to get a few lines of your feelings about an ape, and you have written a one book also. And what I found on your Facebook account also, that a special place you have for ape. So could you tell us about this thing? That what exactly that you do with this thing?
Okay, sure. But just to get back to the Sontag, I can't remember exactly what she says in there. But if you're
Okay, okay. Could I,
interested,
could I take this question once again if you would
sure.
like to get that? This is the question of walking with Susan sound text and photography. So can you please speak few lines on this essay? So exactly, if you have any particular question, I think it will be better for him to answer. Exact question actually you are looking for.
Yeah. What I would say is if the
So what
person
to say
who's,
absolutely on this essay? There
yeah,
is
who's
several
ever,
aspects.
go ahead, who's ever
Okay.
asking that question, if that person's
Shrutishree,
all,
I'd like to, Shrutishree, on behalf of Sir, I'm asking you that if you have any particular question regarding this issue, then please drop this particular question. Because if you answer only say some few lines, then it's very difficult what he will say about the lines. If a particular question from one particular aspect, then it will be better for him to answer. I hope that you have understood what Sir would like to convey. Okay, sir,
yeah.
your love for apes, sir, please.
And my love for apes, well, we are apes. I mean,
Yes, definitely.
we are great apes also. Yeah, I mean, the progression of things. So, for instance, in the presentation, there was a slide. I don't want to try to pull it up because I'll mess something up. But there was a slide in there by an ape who's here in a sanctuary in the United States, and it's a painting. Patty Reagan runs the sanctuary. So, apes like to paint. But the question is, can they assign meaning to what they're painting? I think they can, because in the book that evolved out of this presentation, Art and Adaptability, I start, I think it's the first chapter, with a couple of anecdotes um, where Willie Smits, he works with orangutans in Indonesia, was gifted with objects from apes. In one instance, he had rewild an ape from captivity, and when he did so, he gave her a certain kind of leaf. I forget the name of the plant as a token. And then some years later, he encountered her and her child in the forest, and she gave him the same leaf. And then on another occasion, an orangutan took an orange peel, perforated it in a certain way, wrapped it in burlap, and gave it to Willie Smits. Now, I don't know about you, but there seems to be some kind of symbolic attitude in that behavior. And even if you don't want to believe that, there's at least some kind of recognition of reciprocity in the gifting.
Okay, that the girl who asked the question that she has a particular question. So, do I take the question? I'm taking this question. Uh, so, can photographs actually convey the reality? Somchak said regarding Hanoi said that we saw in reality was opposite of what we saw in pictures.
Well, I am not an expert. And this is a good question. I mean, maybe if you're working on a piece of writing, maybe this is the key question you could address. To what extent does photography represent reality? And if you look at some of the things in neurobiology that I have been reading over the years, you'll see that different parts of our brain do different things. And, we can be tricked into seeing something that's not there. So does photography represent reality? It must represent a reality of the photographer. She is seeing something through that lens.
Okay.
I could see that question. Yeah, you could do a nice piece of writing with that question, combining it with some neurobiology, neurocognition. There's a lot out there.
Okay. So, as if I know question right now over here. So, if any question comes, definitely I will share the question with you through email, as I always do. On this note, I would like to convey my heartfelt thanks to you. The thank is very insignificant word to express what I am right now feeling for you, because it's a valuable time that you have given for us in the morning. Thank you very much for giving this time and this wonderful lecture. And I hope the next time, if we invite you, and we would get you valuable time that time too. So, sir, please be there for a few minutes, and I'm after this one, I'm talking to you for a few minutes, and I finally see you off. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm taking
All
you
right.
off right now.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. So be there. So, all the participants, thank you very much for joining here, this 23rd session. And I hope that you have liked this session, like earlier sessions also. And our next session, 24th session, is coming on 9th September at 7 p.m. So, stay safe, stay protected. Good night for today. Tada, bye bye. See you on 9th September at 7 p.m. on this page. Tada, bye bye.